Okay, we're on paragraph 4, 5. I remember reading out these five signs indicating the existence of the desolator in the Holy Land he brings out, which is just enumerating the scriptural passage from Daniel.
I got my mark at the end of 5.
Yeah. Okay. So what he was saying that there at the end of paragraph 5 just explaining that there was yet one more sign that was provided by the Spirit through Daniel to indicate when to expect the diminishing or the drawing up of the desolating power, and that is when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And then the next paragraph will go into how long a period that would be. And I think we read on that from Daniel 12. And 12 verse 7. Daniel looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. One said unto the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long? That was the question. How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And the answer was, I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand under heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be fulfilled. So that was the question and the answer. So in paragraph 6 it talks about the prediction that Daniel makes about when the abomination on the Holy Land would begin to diminish. And he says, it is written in Daniel chapter 12 verse 11. He quotes there, and when the day hath been removed, even for to set up an abomination of desolation, there shall be 1,290 days. And that's from the 11th verse that we read from the 7th verse. And it goes on to the we read on this section, and then it just continues. And he says, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination and make a desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. How long? And here is a long period. Here is a long period without any other beginning indicated than that of its setting up. Its continuance is stated at 1,290 years. This is the whole length of time during which the abomination was to prevail upon the land of Israel without beginning to dry up. In other words, that would be existing in its prime, no signs of it diminishing. In other words, when the 1,290 ended, the drying up process would start. It would commence. But as to the exact number of years that would be consumed in the progressive outpouring of that determined before the consummation would be reached, we are not informed. Of this, however, we may be assured that the outpouring of that determined upon the desolator of the Holy Land will not have reached its consummation until though it falls upon the mountains of Israel in the war of Armageddon, which is the great which is the great climacteric, the great climacteric or climax of the sixth vial. So Daniel provided here a timeline or a period of duration of the desolation. That timeline is given as on the day for a year principle, 1290 years. The starting date and ending date of the 1290 year period is the subject of the next paragraph. So we'll go into beginnings and ending dates here. Anything on what's been said so far?
So what does he call, or what does he feel the abomination of desolation is?
Well, I think that's kind of what you'll get into here, and as he goes into what the beginning of it and the ending of it is. It's a desolating power over the Holy Land. And I think that very obviously there's probably several answers to that. But the obvious one was that it desolated in fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks, and that desolated the Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. The Romans. And they are part of that. They are part of the little horn, the goat. They are the Grecian horn.
Doesn't really matter who it is, they're Gentiles.
Yeah.
Any Paul?
Yeah. And I think it's hard to say. You can't say that it was the Romans. You can't say that it was the Turks. You can't say that it was the Vandals or any of the group nations. It was all of them. Anybody that was down in that land during the period. But what he's saying we need to establish is what was the start of it. And when you can get that, you can start to work out the end of what that might be. Mohammedans were another one. They were in there. Moscow Bomar was another one. It was a whole series of desolators. But probably the beginning one would have been the Romans.
Yeah, that actually makes more sense than arguing over who it was.
Yeah.
Like we've heard different ideas on it.
It was all of them.
It fits.
Anybody that inhabited that land, that were persecutors of Israel, that desolated the Holy Mount, kept the sacrifice, the daily sacrifice of it. All of it, it was all involved.
That still be going on?
Sure.
We thought, or at least we thought maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's like he says, it will go on, and once it reaches consummation, it will go falls upon the mountains of Israel and War of Armageddon. So we'll just go into that, and maybe then we can have a little more discussion on it. He talks about the beginning and the ending of the 1290-year period of the desolator. This is the period of the sixth vial, the wrathful contents of which are that determined upon the desolator, is not included in the 1290 years of the last desolating abomination of the series. The end of these terrible years connects with the beginning of the sixth vial. So the end of these terrible years connects with the beginning of the sixth vial. Because there was to be a desolating by the ascendant abomination until that determined should come to be poured out upon the desolator. Now, what is the fact in regard to the abomination in the ascendant? It is that the power enthroned in Constantinople, the little horn of the goat, in the spasmodic grasp of Greek, Saracen, Latin, and Turk. There you have, the series. Often the Latin would be the Romans, and the Turks finally. And the spasmodic grasp of Greek, Saracen, Latin, and Turk, summarily expressed in the terms Catholic and Mohammedan, has been the desolating abomination of the Holy Land for 1,290 years, ending in 1820-1823. The condition of the country between the reign of Adrian, AD 137, and the beginning of the reign of Justinian, AD 527, was as prosperous as any other province of the Roman Empire, but a change of fortune ensued in the epoch of his reign, AD 529 to 33, that would be the reign of Justinian, which was signalized by a desolating war between the empires of Persia and Constantinople, in which the Euphratean countries, including Palestine, were the seat of conflict. A peace was made in 533, which proved only a suspension of arms. The war was renewed in 540 and thenceforth continued its destructive course for 20 years. For 1,290 years, wasting and desolation progressed with ruinous effect, especially since the adherents of Muhammad made Syria and Palestine, both included in the land promised to Abraham and his seed. That's an important little tidbit of information there. They made Syria and Palestine their battleground with the Greeks and Latins. The Ottoman Turks possessed themselves of Constantinople under the Sixth Trumpet in 1453, and they will be expelled from it under the Sixth Vial, when that determined shall have had its full effect upon them. They were, as Mohammedans, identified with the 1,290 years of desolating abomination for a long series of ages and generations, hence being found in occupation of the Holy Land and filling the throne of the little horn of the goat or dragon. At the end of the 1,290 years, they have become obnoxious to the wrath, which has reduced their power to the nullity we behold in 1868. If then we have correctly located the beginning of the 1290 years in the epoch 529 to 33, the termination of the period will be 1820 to 23, which is signalized by the commencement of the Sixth Vial, or of that determined upon the desolator. So he suggests the starting date of that 1,290 years to be approximately 529 to 533, to which when you add the 1,290 brings us to approximately 1819 to 23.
I have often read that some brethren thought that when Allenby took over Jerusalem from the Turks, 1917 was a significant date.
Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is when the diminishing began.
Yeah,
when Allenby took over, that would be toward the end of the diminishing. But it began a lot earlier than that. It began around the time of Napoleon. That's when he.
The Turks were to be reckoned with until then.
Yeah. And they were still, of course, to be reckoned with even after 1923, but 1823. But they were in a diminishing phase. Actually, they started diminishing quite a while before that, I think in 1500, but I think what he's talking about is their grasp of the land of Palestine. And, they still held a firm grasp upon it in 1823, and that grasp, they were losing that grasp after that.
1917 was the Spanish. Because I can remember the ruler being called the sick man of Turkey.
Well, he wrote this in 1868, is that right? That's what I said.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big issues of the day, was who is the sick man of Eureka, which turned out to be the Turks.
Yeah.
Didn't they say that when the Turks would offer swine's blood on the altar?
Yeah, I think
You're getting, you got confused with Antiochus Epiphanes in the time. They didn't have an altar in the time of the Turks. There was no altar there.
Swine's blood, okay.
It was gone. Well, yeah, Antiochus Epiphanes, the Egyptian desolator in the time of the Maccabees, that's one of the things he did to the Maccabees was to
Make them mad.
oh, yeah. Such bring up awareness, yes. Yeah. Just going back to this Daniel 12. Just reading a little bit from the expositor. From the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, the angel clarifies certain details. And we're reading here now the comments on Daniel chapter 12, verse 11. The angel clarifies certain details of the previous prophecy given to Daniel, compare verse 9. The daily refers to the Mosaic constitution of daily offerings, which was taken away in the dissolution of the nations by Rome in AD 70. Daniel 8, verses 11 to 13, the little horn of the goat, the Roman power, caused the daily to cease when Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed. But a worse scene would follow. Brother Thomas translates this verse, and from after the time the daily shall be removed, even for to set up an abomination making desolate, and so on. The early ecclesial reliance on Judaism, though opposed by the apostles, developed a priestly class after the example of the Levites in the Mosaic Code. Ultimately, the priest class within the ecclesias expanded until a recognized clergy was established, laying the foundation for the abomination that maketh desolate to be manifested in the development of the Catholic Church. Daniel was reminded of the Jewish state would be replaced for a time with a Gentile abomination of religion. This is where he makes a little bit of the difference there, although there was a desolation that absolutely happened in AD 70 with the removing of the daily sacrifice. There was a definite fulfillment. He says this was talking about, and from after the time that daily was removed, there would be a particular desolating power set up that would desolate in a way that had never been done before, and this would be with this Gentile abomination of religion. So then he goes on, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up the full establishment of the Roman Catholic Church through the decree of Focus occurred in 1608. And there's where he's setting the beginning line for this 1290 years, when that abomination had been set up, fully matured in the state church system of the Romans, the horn of the goat. This became the commencing point for a period of oppression of Daniel's people, both natural and spiritual. And so there shall be 1,290 days, a day for a year principle followed throughout. In this prophecy commenced at 608 AD, terminates in AD 1898. Brother Mansfield has a little different start date there with the decree of Focus. But whichever way you put it, there's significant ending dates. We have to talk this as a dynamic range. A dynamic range. There's multiplicity of starting dates and a multiplicity of very significant ending dates. And he's just bringing out another one here. 533 was definitely a significant starting date in the time of Justinian. That ended in 1823 when there was definitely significant events in relation to what we're talking about. But there was another one, AD 608, and that terminated in AD 98 with the efforts of Theodore Herzl and the first Jewish National Congress in Basel, Switzerland. This event commenced the train of circumstances which led finally to the revival of Israel, the freeing of Jerusalem, and events preparatory to the coming of Christ. The time periods listed above concern events among the Western nations involving the Roman power and the papacy. But the Thomas and exposition of Daniel alludes to another aspect seen in the eastern regions. And he quotes from him. He says, "As everyone knows, this desolator of the Holy Land thus far is the Ottoman power, a time of the end representative of the long prevailing abomination. The 1290 were to reach to the end when the time came to pour out upon the desolator, that is, when the 1290 years should end. The pouring out of that determined upon the Ottoman should begin. It is well known that there has been a notable pouring out of calamities since 1923 to the present time." That would be in the time of the writing of the exposition of Daniel. So then this is probably very interesting, and I think we've read it before. It says the following dates are significant. So we'll look at 8533, which is what we were just reading about in Eureka. The decree of Justinian to promote the Roman bishop as head of the church. If you add 1290, results in 1823, when Greece gained independence from Turkey and the Euphratean power began to evaporate. Revelation 16 verse 12, which is what we're reading about. Then 610, the decree of Focus proclaiming civil power to the papacy. Adding 1290 to that results in 1900. I think he had, there's a little bit of a time there, 608, 610, 1898 to 1900, when Zionism was sponsored in England, giving impetus to Jewish national hopes. Now, AD 622, Muhammad proclaimed a new faith, Islam, and swore to eradicate idolatry and subdue the Jews. He had 1290, results in AD 1912, when the events in the Balkan countries led to World War I and the final withdrawal of Turkish control over the Holy Land. Thus, all the commencing dates that may be appropriately selected conclude in the present era and indicate conclusively the imminence of the fulfillment of all the prophecies of Daniel. Though this information may have caused Daniel some dismay at the long period following his decease, it gives us great encouragement that shortly the Prince will appear, Daniel will be resurrected, and we shall be saved. And then he has another one there in verse 12, the blessed is he that waiteth, and you've got another time period there, 1,305 and 30 days, 1335. And that was another significant date. There's a blessing put on those who have this discerning eye of faith and that wait and come to this time. Commencing AD 529-533 with the decree of Justinian in Constantinople. This period concludes in 1868, right about the time of the writing of when Brother Thomas was writing. But what happened there was the end of the temporal power of the papacy. So, there's another date period given there, 1335. Again, you have a dynamic range, and you apply these dates to that, and you come out with significant ending dates as well. You apply that 604 to 610, the decree of Focus period, granted civil power to the papacy. That concludes in AD 1945, when Russia emerged as a world power in preparation for the time of the end. If you look at 1822, when Muhammad proclaimed the Islamic faith and established the Muslim calendar, that period concludes in AD 1957 with the signing of the Treaty of Rome, the European Economic Union, your common market, which was indicative of the formation of the feet of the image. So the 1335-year period indicates an epoch that will consummate in the great blessing of verse 13, when Daniel and all the faithful will be gathered together to receive their destined inheritance. All the remarkable events of the present century focus upon the obvious signs that indicate the imminent fulfillment of these things. So there's, I'm sure that Brother Thomas had been living in later years. He would have seen these very significant beginning and ending dates, this dynamic range that we have to work with. And there's even other dates that, and I didn't put the link to that at the end here, but there's some other significant timelines that we can look at on that. So, there's another beginning date that we can look at for all these years, these 1260, 1290, and 1335. If you calculate that from the construction of the Mosque of Omar, which I think was one of the one of the icons of the desolation on that Temple Mount, where the Jewish temple had been and where the daily sacrifice had been offered. Here is a mosque put in, of Muhammad and the Muslim faith, put right on the very rock that speculation has that Abraham offered Isaac on Mount Moriah, and just a few feet away from where the most holy place was on the temple. And so here, this is erected on there, and that was about 677 to 688 AD. And if you apply those 1260, 1290, and 1335, it terminates 1848, 1967, and 2022 to 23. So there's still some dates there yet to look forward to that we don't know what they'll bring, respectively. The 2400 years that Brother Thomas itself begins 540, which is the third year of Belshazzar, 540 BC, terminated in 1860, thereabouts. Some say it was 2300 years, and if you apply the beginning of Alexander's campaign against the land, or 333 BC, when he defeated Persia, terminates 1947 and 1967. Respectively, which are also very significant dates, particularly the 67 war, which freed the Temple Mount. So we have, very, very significant dates with any of them. There was, and the blue line here shows the two different dates that you could begin that period, and what the ending dates would be there. And if you took the 2400, Brother Thomas, there's a little bit of a dispute there as to whether it was 2300 or 2400. Brother Thomas translated it as being 2400. I think some of the brethren in later years have said that, the translations that he was using, they don't bear that out, that it really was 2300 years. So you have to just kind of take that with a grain of salt there. But however you do it, it's so remarkable that however you do it, doesn't matter a whole lot. 1947, 48, a very significant date, the foundation of the Jewish state. Very significant date. Gordon?
So I was just wondering about that mosque. Omar is still standing there. It's still kind of like you say, an icon. And it's odd that they put it on the Mount Moriah, which thought to be the place of, Abraham's offering of Isaac, which
basically Ishmael.
Yeah.
They used Ishmael.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, because that would disprove their theory of inheritance.
Yeah. They put Ishmael for Isaac.
Because Ishmael was the firstborn.
Yes.
That's just what we've been reading in Genesis there recently is carried right on down to today. The son of the bondwoman is still is still ridiculing the.
So they should things up.
Yeah.
Well, you see the Sharon, you know, the Arabs, the raised and spawned, but the Jews are feeling bad about it. I think he's a man of destiny.
Well, even his death is stirring up conflict.
Mhm. I read an interesting.
He was a soldier.
Yeah. Read an interesting article. I don't know. Steve Mail sent out here this weekend, and the Obama administration has tabled a plan for peace between Palestine and Israel, which includes Israel looking after the national borders for a few years and then turning it over to the Palestinians. And the IDF says that's ridiculous, because if you turn that over to the Palestinians, Hamas and all of those people will flood in here and they'll destroy Israel. And there must be a mole or a spy or something in the Palestinian camp, because one of the guys in the Palestinian Authority, he said, well, what we are supposed to be getting out of this agreement that's being brokered by John Kerry is not really what we're after as a total picture, but we have to view it as the first step in the annihilation of Israel. He said, once we get to that step, then we can take the next step and begin the ethnic cleansing of the Israeli race. He said that, privately, but somehow it got leaked out on Facebook. And so it tells you exactly what their goals are. It's that same old thing. It's the Ishmael and Isaac thing.
Yeah. Social media is really something.
Mm-hmm. There are no secrets.
No. You watch what you say and go on. So we'll get to the final paragraph on here, the 8th paragraph, and he speaks to what he calls the difficulty of Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 and its solution. He says, in concluding this section, I may add that Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 has given the commentators much trouble. The daily sacrifice was taken away AD 70. As the passage stands in the English version, it would seem that the 1290 should begin there. This would bring the end of the period of 1360, the very midnight of abominations making desolate, in other words, the very peak of the desolations. That's not the beginning of it, not the ending of it, but the very middle of it. Not being able to work out the arithmetic in that line, they have turned the daily into a figure of the Romish apostasy, or sanctuary to be cleansed, and so forth. We need not, however, trace out their theories and consume time and space and arguments against them. It may suffice to remark that the obscurity of the text is referable to the loose rendering of the word mayeth and the tense of the verb usar. The former, mayeth, is translated from the time, but Justinus, without particular reference to this text, gives more than in the time. In other words, in excess of that time. I didn't read that paragraph where he says, Justinus, without particular reference to this text, gives more than in the time when, as a good rendering. In our text, more than from the time would be the exact signification in the sense of when or after. The other word, husar, and I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing this correct, I didn't look them up, probably not, but anyway, the other word husar is in the perfect tense, not the future tense as in the common version. In other words, the common version has after the daily has been removed. It was removed to make way for the overspreading of abominations of desolation. But how long after its removal to the beginning of the particular abomination that was to continue 1290, it gives no information. In other words, that it was the beginning of it was to be after the removal of the daily. But how long after is not given. The beginning of the period would be known by those who should be able to perceive the opening of the sixth vial at its termination. That is at the termination of the 1290. The sixth vial must open at the end of the 1290. In this, so he's saying that this is the beginning of that period, then it would be known by those who would be able to perceive the opening of the sixth vial at its termination, and you'd subtract 1290 from that. And from thence reckoning back 1290 years. It had a contemporary beginning with the 1260, ending in the fall of the 10th of the great city. That is the 1260. The end of the 1260 years was the period of that which led up to the French Revolution and the resurrection of the witnesses. In other words, 1790 to 93. And with the 1335 of Daniel 12 and 12 ending in 1868. So all those periods, he says, uses a common start point. And then they have these different endpoints. The endpoints being 1790 to 93 for the 1260 years. 1820 to 23 for the 1290 years. And 1868 for the 1335. Because if the Justinian epoch of 529 to 33 be not the correct beginning of these periods, I know not what other historical epochs can have any reasonable claims to be true. So, while, like I say, there is a dynamic range and very significant beginnings and ending dates for that period, I think we have to go with his, for this specific thing, we need to go with his 529 to 33 and terminating at the beginning of the sixth vial, which is 1820 to 23. And that for this particular thing, that is still quite accurate. So,
the point that he's making in this paragraph is that if you try and pick a beginning date before you can see the end date, you've got the tail wagging the dog.
yes.
You've got to be living beyond the end date to establish the end date and count backwards to find the beginning date.
Which is really what he told Daniel. Blessed is he that waiteth till the end of the period.
Yeah.
Then you'll see these things, how they work out. So I'll just read the summary here, that whether it'll have give you anything extra to it or not, I don't know. But the 1290-year period obviously did not begin with the destruction of Jerusalem. So the taking away of the daily sacrifice is not a marker, except in the sense that it would not begin before then, but could begin at any time thereafter, as the author shows the text to indicate. Establishing the exact start date would be a privilege reserved to be experienced by those living in after times, able to look back and calculate as we are doing from the luxury of hindsight. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think basically what seems what you were saying.
Yeah. So, Brother Mansfield's, projection. He just says as a possibility, a projection into 2023 or something like that is pretty conjectural. It'll be up to those living at that time, if time remains, to establish whether that is an ending period or not.
Well, and that's going with a little different. 2023, I think, was going at a little different start time too. That wasn't really relating to this particular. Well, I guess I don't think this was Mansfield either. This was something that I think it was in the Times and Seasons from Brother Carter.
Oh,
he figures out about the Mosque of Omar, and using that start date to to come up. And like I say, it's all speculative. But, you know, the dates that we have here are all, like the red and the yellow here are not speculative. But 1948, we know that was a very significant date. We've got 1967 war, the Jews reoccupy the temple site. That was a very significant date. What 2022 holds for us, we don't know. Some might say the return of Christ. That's not necessarily what's indicated here. It would be some significant event. And, you know, it's purely, we don't have the hindsight on that yet. So,
I said here, we read this January the 15th, 1960, and we're still none wiser.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you know, not quite. I mean, we didn't know about the '67 war at that time, so we're able to have the luxury of hindsight to go back, you know, on this period here indicated in yellow, and say, hey, you know, that was a significant termination date there of that period that began in 677, 688. That time span, that 10-year period, and so you have that. And none of these things, like even 67, are not, you know, it's not the particular date of the day of the war, it's all the events leading up to it. There's an era here. Just like there was a, you know, 677 to 688, where you got there about 11 year span of a period of working towards the building of the mosque. You have probably, if you look back on the events of the '67 war, you'd have a 10-year period of events leading up to that particular event too. You're really able to get down and study it.
So when Christ is day in the hour,
no, that's the point we're making here. Even when we project out to 2022, it's not, we're not trying to say, hey, this is the return of Christ. Nothing like that.
Christ didn't know.
But probably for those that have luxury to live after that, you know, 2022, if Christ remains away, and look back on that time, they'll say, hey, you know, something happened there.
Well, I just wondered if it's just guesswork, but what about the great earthquake that will destroy that mosque and everything else? You know, I mean, it could be when that happens.
Yeah.
That could be into the judgment period somewhat.
Yeah, it's true.
But the fact is that what we see is there are each ages marked out, and the fact that we don't know the exact beginning, we don't know the exact end, which, you know, coincides with the idea that no one knows the day or the hour. We're not supposed to calculate it, but it does give us a sense that these things are being fulfilled as they were supposed to be.
There's an interesting interchange on Facebook. I don't know. Maybe you saw it on one of the Cryptodelphian sites, where one brother making a definite projection about when Christ would return. I think he's saying 2030. You know, and that, you know, if you saw that interchange or not, it was really interesting. And you know, a lot of the responses were, you know, you're really stepping out when you try to do something like that. We're not to know the day or the hour, you know. Yes.
And his argument was, well, we're not told the day or the hour, but we can calculate the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that was either. I mean, that would kind of moot the purpose of concealing the day or the hour. I mean,
Yes.
That's pretty insignificant.
Yeah.
And the year would be what God would be hiding from us.
Yeah. Well, I think there were a lot of good, reasonable arguments against that theory, and it's nice to see that come out. Anyway, so I think your time is up. That basically that completes that section. Get into the next one. which will be the historical summary of the drying up of the Great River Euphrates.
The day and the hour of the sure the everything polished up.
Yeah, right.